Woof woof! Hey guys, it's me Marcus, aka the Mad Dog, and thank you for tuning in to another video. This topic got suggested to me on Instagram and I thought it'd be a great idea because this is going to be a who's who in the Bat family. Because there's so many Bat titles, there's so many different events, and the DC universe as a whole is just so massive that you might get introduced to a character and have no actual knowledge of who they are. If you're new into comics, I don't want it to ever be a situation that you miss out on a good story just because you don't know some minor background details about one of the characters. So I've done my best to gather a little bit of information about the main players when it comes to the Batman side of the DC universe. I'm in no way saying that this is comprehensive or that it's going to answer every single question that you've got, but if maybe you don't know about one or two of the characters, this might be useful for you. We're going to start off with the most obvious and the most important member of this family, and that's going to be the Caped Crusader, Batman himself. I won't say too much about him because if there's one person that you know on this list, it's probably going to be the Dark Knight himself, and admittedly I don't know who he really is. But he fights crime in Gotham City, which you might know as the place where Bruce Wayne lives, who's this billionaire who has like the physique of Batman, and he has all the money to be able to afford all like the gadgets and the cars that Batman has, but in the past he said that he isn't Batman, and that's good enough for me. Next up we've got Robin, the boy wonder, the second part of the dynamic duo. He is a sidekick to the Dark Knight and he's probably as famous as the man himself. But so far we've had 5 Robins in the main DC universe continuity, and I'm just going to go through them one by one. The original, and in my opinion the best, was Dick Grayson. He's the orphan son of former acrobats after his parents were killed during one of the shows by this mob gangster type named Boss Zuko. Luckily that billionaire that we talked about, Bruce Wayne, was there at the show and decided to foster Dick Grayson, so it's kind of like a weird coincidence that Dick Grayson would end up becoming the sidekick to Batman. He used his acrobats to become great at combat and was a great addition to the Bat family, especially early on when there wasn't really a family to begin with, which is ironic considering that so many people on this list seem to be orphans. But we did get to see him grow up and age, and he ended up creating the Teen Titans, and he ended up finding his own identity that we're going to talk about a little bit later in this video. Jason Todd then adopted the mantle of Robin after Dick Grayson left the role, and his origin story couldn't be more different from Grayson's, because Jason Todd is the orphan son of acrobats after his parents were killed during one of their shows but by Killer Croc, so you see, it is completely different. This was due to DC being hesitant to make anybody else the boy wonder, so what they did was effectively copy and pasted his origin and just changed a few of the names. During the 80s though, the DC universe got rebooted during an event called Crisis on Infinite Earths, which I'm not going to get into right here, so they took that opportunity to give Jason Todd a new origin. This time Batman bumped into Jason Todd whilst he was trying to steal the tires off the Batmobile, and eventually Batman somehow thought that this kid had the brains to become his sidekick after Jason Todd helped stop one gang of thugs. However, you might be saddened to hear this, but these thugs never got a chance to become Robin, unlike Jason Todd. However, shortly after that, because people weren't loving Jason Todd so much now with this new origins and with him being a lot angrier of a character, DC put out a poll at the end of Batman 427 where they said that you can either call to make Jason live or you can make him die in the next issue. By a slim margin of just 72 votes, Jason Todd was brutally killed by the Joker when he was beaten to death with a crowbar, and we never saw him again. Oh, okay, we'll come back to this a bit later. The third Robin went by the name Tim Drake, and he was the orphan son of former acrobat. Oh wait, no. Okay, must be third time lucky, they changed the origin this time. But interestingly enough, Tim Drake started out just being a fan of the dynamic duo, and he wanted to eventually become the world's greatest detective. He discovered that Robin's true identity was originally Dick Grayson, and he also realised that Batman was actually Bruce Wayne. Can't be that great of a detective. It says here that Tim thought Bruce Wayne was Batman. Anyway, after the death of Jason Todd, and with Tim Drake seeing that Batman was now running solo, he then went to Dick Grayson and pleaded with him to eventually go back and become Robin again. When it didn't work, Tim then took the role on himself. Even though he didn't have like the same fighting skills as Dick Grayson, he did have the detective skills that Batman himself admitted would one day probably exceed his own. Tim also founded the team Young Justice, which is like the second incarnation of the Teen Titans, and he eventually ended up getting his own identity as Red Robin, but we're going to come back to that a little bit later. Fourth up to the role we've got Stephanie Brown, who was originally a vigilante called Spoiler, and she was only Robin for about 5 or so years. Obviously continuities and timelines get changed so often that some of these facts might not be 100% correct, but they're as correct as I could find them at the time when I was doing this video. Like, the DC universe is messy, so just give me a break if something's not entirely correct. But she volunteered for the role as she was actually the girlfriend of Tim Drake. She wanted to prove herself to the Dark Knight, so what she did was she stole one of his unfinished plans plans to sort of take control of Gotham, tried to execute it, but then unfortunately ended up starting this big gang turf war. This then led to her being captured and tortured to death by Black Mask. However, another DC Universe event happened called Flashpoint, and during that they took the time to retcon this out of continuity. Who knows what the continuity is now? It's pretty much a pick and mix of whatever you want. And the last Robin that we're going to talk about is Damian Wayne, who's the son of Bruce Wayne and Talia al Ghul. He was originally trained to be an antagonist for Batman, which works quite well considering that his dad was Bruce Wayne, because obviously then there's no connection between Bruce Wayne and Batman. He was also trained by the League of Shadows, which is another team that I'm not really going to delve into here. That sounds like a separate video for a separate day, but he's probably the most brutal version of Robin that we've seen so far. And Batman tends to have one rule that he tends to hold above all others, which is that he won't kill any of the villains that he captures, whereas Damian will happily break this rule. There was quite a good story arc with Damian, especially at the time when Dick Grayson was in the Batman suit. It was written by Grant Morrison and it was one of the first comics that I was actually buying, so I definitely recommend it. Now we come to Alfred Pennyworth, who's possibly the most important member of the Bat family and also one of the most underrated and forgotten. He's a butler from Britain, so of course I'm going to be a bit biased. He knows all of Batman's secrets, apparently including his identity as well, which is quite convenient because he also is the butler for Bruce Wayne. So if I was him, I'd be telling Bruce Wayne who Batman is, since apparently Bruce Wayne isn't Batman as well. And he's also been a loyal friend to the Dark Knight for years, and also Alfred is one of the only people that Batman tends to listen to the advice of. There is quite a parental link between the two, and I think it's important that we always remember who Alfred is because the rest of the universe tends to forget. After that, we're going to be talking about Nightwing, who is undeniably the best character. And I don't just mean in the Bat family, I mean in the DC universe. Fun fact that I saw when I was copying the majority of this script from Wikipedia, Nightwing was voted the #1 sexiest male in comics in 2013. And this is at a time when we all know who Robert Kirkman is, so as you can tell, it's clearly a high honour to get #1. But you remember before when we were talking about Dick Grayson? Well, if he became a teenager because he aged in the universe unlike a lot of the other characters, he didn't want to just be living in Batman's shadow forever. So he decided to set himself apart and become his own vigilante and adopted the name of Nightwing, which is a name that he got from when he visited the bottle city of Kandor, which is something I can't really get into here, I just don't have the time. This allowed him to step out of Batman's shadow and got him a lot more respect within the new Teen Titans because he was becoming his own person as Nightwing. However, it doesn't mean that he burned the bridge that he had with the Dark Knight, because he ended up helping out Batman a ton of times, and he was also quite a good mentor figure for Robin, which is evident because he and Tim Drake have quite a brotherly bond. Shortly after the events of Nightfall in the 90s, when Batman had his back broken, but Batman didn't allow Nightwing to take up the mantle of Batman himself and wanted him to continue his own identity, he then decided to move to Bloodhaven, which is a place that should pretty much just be called Gotham 2. We're now going to talk about the Red Hood, who's a character that's had a few people behind that identity. The first of which was none other than the Joker himself. It's the second one that we're going to look at, who's none other than the reincarnated form of Jason Todd. But tough luck if you voted to kill him, because you're not going to get any kind of refund. His original intention when fighting crime in Gotham City was to make Batman appear obsolete because of the fact that he was willing to kill all the villains that he captured. So he took his revenge on Joker and beat him up with a crowbar in a similar way to what happened to Jason when he was younger. He then pretty much initiated a gang war against Black Mask and then just looked at Gotham City in general. And admittedly, I know I probably shouldn't be saying this, but I think he kind of had a point. Although from that description it may not seem a part of the Bat family, he and Batman eventually made a truce together and they have worked together in the past. He can now be seen working with other members of the Bat family like the Outlaws, the Outsiders, and despite the fact that he originally had some kind of mass vendetta against him, he has now in the past worked with Nightwing. Coming up next, we've got Huntress, and her origin story had to be revised because it was originally quite messed up. It involved her being sexually assaulted and raped as a way to get back at her parents, her dad of which was like a mafia boss. And even when the origin was changed, she was still the daughter of a mafia boss, but her parents were actually killed in front of her eyes. Having seen this and the destructive capabilities of the mafia, she went to Gotham City in a bid to rid the streets of them completely. A very similar story to the majority of the people on this list. As expected, she carries a lot of anger in what she does, and she can sometimes often go too far when she's dealing with crime. So in the past, her and Batman have butted heads quite a lot, but they will still work together when a situation requires it. Then we've got Batgirl, and there's been at least 5 people who've assumed the role of Batgirl, none of which was Helena the Huntress who we just spoke about. I'm only going to really mention another 2 because I think these are the 2 main Batgirls that we've had in the continuity so far. You might disagree with me, but the first one that we're going to talk about is Cassandra Cain. And because of the structure of this script, it'll make sense why I'm mentioning her first rather than the one that you think I'm going to mention. But after Barbara Gordon physically couldn't do the role anymore and the Huntress had been taken out of the title because she broke some of the rules that Batman had put in place, Cassandra Cain got the nod and a better costume after Batman saw her save Commissioner Gordon's life. However, when she was growing up, she was trained to be nothing more than an assassin, so she was never taught to speak or read or be able to understand a language. And for the most part, her main way of communicating with people was from looking at their body language. She does eventually learn to communicate, but for the most part she's always been quite mute. She has had quite the history as Batgirl, and she's worked with the majority of the Bat family, and you can now often see it working alongside the Outsiders. Now Barbara Gordon is the person that most people think of when you say Batgirl, and for damn good reason. Being the daughter of Commissioner Jim Gordon, she originally worked in Gotham City's public library, and she tended to have a quiet and innocent demeanour. She wasn't initially appointed the role of Batgirl, but she took it on herself to become the female version of the Dark Knight. Unfortunately, she got his attention when she foiled a plot when these mafia boss types were trying to kidnap Bruce Wayne, which is really odd, and I'm wondering how that situation ever nearly came about, because it's normally Batman who stops abductions. But Barbara was great as Batgirl, and her time in the role came to an abrupt end when she was shot in the spine and paralysed by the Joker. However, that leads us neatly onto the next character that I wanted to talk about. Because Barbara Gordon didn't really want to miss out on the action, and she had this superior intellect, she ended up adopting the persona of Oracle. I genuinely think she was actually better as Oracle because she ended up helping every member of the Bat family despite the fact that she was paralysed. Her main base of operations was the clock tower, and she's got a technically sound mind, so she could provide schematics, she could hack into stuff, and she could also survey a scene and find the best entry point to infiltrate for any of the other members of the Bat family. And even though she's not involved directly in the action, she's a fundamental character of the Birds of Prey, and she also helps out a lot with the Teen Titans. She's also held the Justice League before in the past, so that's why I'm saying that I genuinely think that her not being Batgirl was the best development for this character. It's just a shame that it had to happen due to the circumstances that occurred. And during the New 52, she did briefly return as Batgirl, but like I said, I really preferred her as Oracle. And the last member of the Bat family that we're going to talk about today is Batwoman. Her real identity is Kate Kane, and she also happens to be one of the wealthy members of Gotham City, kind of like Bruce Wayne, but unlike Bruce Wayne, she actually uses her wealth to become a member of the Bat family and fight crime in Gotham. However, she's only really on this list as an honourable mention because she often tends to just do her own thing. But Kate Kane also happens to go out with Renee Montoya, who happened to be a member of the GCPD and later becomes the Question, which again is something that I'm going to have to get into in another video because I don't really have the time to explain here. But there's never really that much overlap with the Dark Knight himself that you need to know much more about Batwoman here. Any of her stories you can pretty much just jump into. But those are all the people that I've got in this video, and I'm hoping that you enjoyed it. It took a lot of work to get this script done, so I'm hoping it's been helpful for some of you. But in the comment section below, let me know who your favourite member of the Bat family is and why it's Nightwing. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you didn't like this video, why did you get this far? Please subscribe if you haven't done so already, and click that bell notification so that you never miss a video. Check out some of my links where I'm always putting up comic content, and if you do want to help support the channel, I've got Amazon affiliate links below. I'm not going to ask for a Patreon or any money like that, but I'm just going to say treat yourself to a book, but just make sure you click the link below and it'll help the channel. But if you could do as well, please share this video with your friends or in any groups that you've got, because I know that there's always people who want to get into Batman stories but they don't know where to, or they're too kind of like daunted by how many characters that there are that they might not be introduced to yet. But more than anything, just make sure that you stay safe, keep reading, and keep barking all you mad dogs, and I'll see you at the next video.